In the year 91 AD, Cornelia, high priestess of the Vestal Virgins in Rome, was sentenced to meet her end. She was bricked up in a small hollow within the city wall and left there to rot. Essentially, she was buried alive. So Cornelia was bound, chained, and led through the Roman streets to the site of her execution. What was her crime? The Roman state declared that she had broken her vow of chastity, an offense known as incestum. As the Virgo Maxima, the chief of the 6 sacred priestesses, charged with guarding the eternal flame of Vesta, Cornelia had been held to a higher standard than nearly any other woman in the empire. She stood condemned while people who once revered her spat as she passed. They crowded the streets to watch her humiliation. They screamed, cursed, called her impure, disgraceful, dangerous. Because according to Roman belief, her sexual impurity threatened not just her own soul, but the safety of the entire city. She had, so they believed, angered the gods. But Cornelia did not go quietly. Above the crowd's fury, her voice rang out, clear and unbroken. Caesar thinks that I am impure, I who have performed the sacred rites by which he conquered and triumphed. Some in the crowd went silent, others kept jeering, most didn't care. The procession continued. At the Field of Mars, the march ended. There were no gallows, no cross, no fire, only a simple opening in the earth, just wide enough for a body to pass through. Beneath it lay a small chamber carved into the stone foundation of the city. Cornelia's punishment was immurement. She was not to be struck, not to be burned, not to be beheaded. She was to be placed alive inside this chamber, and the opening bricked shut. As she stepped toward her tomb, her long white stola caught on the crumbling masonry. She stumbled. An executioner stepped forward, offering her a hand, but she refused it. Cornelia straightened, shook off the dust, and continued. She took the final steps of her life unaided. Then she turned to face Rome's light for the last time, and the bricks began to rise. One by one, the gap narrowed till when the final stone closed the chamber, sunlight disappeared from her world, forever. And that was when the real punishment began. Inside that narrow chamber beneath Rome, Cornelia stood in total silence. There was no sound but her own breath and the pounding of her heart. Claustrophobia gripped her almost immediately. The body can survive without food for weeks, but without water, death usually comes in 2 to 3 days. In that time, the body begins to shut down. Blood pressure falls, organs begin to fail. But what breaks first is the mind, and Cornelia's mind had no shield. In the pitch darkness, her brain began searching for input. It found none, so it created its own. This is called the Ganzfeld effect, a known neurological reaction to sensory deprivation. With nothing to see, her eyes invented movement, faint glows, swirling patterns, pulsating shapes. At first they were harmless, but soon they shifted into faces, ghostly outlines, impossible figures, grotesque shadows painted by her own mind. Then came the voices. With the world outside muffled by layers of stone, even the faintest creak of her joints, the tiniest shuffling sound, became distorted. Her brain, desperate to explain the silence, turned these into whispers, murmurs and full conversations between beings that didn't exist. At first she recognized them for what they were, hallucinations. But then the distinction began to fade. Reality slipped. Her thoughts scattered. Her body remained upright, but her consciousness began to unravel. As thirst tightened its grip, her tongue swelled, her skin dried and cracked. Her eyes burned in the darkness. Each passing hour pulled her deeper into a waking coma of terror, confusion, and pain. Her muscles weakened, balance failed, and body collapsed to the stone floor. By the second day, she could no longer stand. Her breathing became shallow. Her thoughts dissolved into fragments. And still, death did not come. What ended her life was not a clean blow. It was dehydration, organ failure, and shock. Cornelia died alone, deep in the walls of the city she had served. To understand why Cornelia was sentenced to such a harrowing end, you have to understand what she represented. Cornelia was not just any priestess. She was the Virgo Maxima, the highest ranking of the 6 Vestal virgins, hand-picked to guard the sacred flame of Vesta, the goddess of hearth and home. This flame wasn't just symbolic. It was believed to be the lifeblood of Rome itself. As long as it burned, the empire would stand. So Rome entrusted this divine responsibility to 6 girls, taken from their families before puberty, trained, isolated, forbidden to marry, forbidden to love. For 30 years they were bound by a vow of chastity so strict, even the slightest suspicion of a romantic liaison was treated as treason against the gods. The punishment was death, but not just any death. Because Vestals were sacred, their blood could not be spilled. That meant no stoning, no whipping, no crucifixion. Rome had to invent a new form of execution, bloodless, hidden, silent, and so immurement became the favored sentence. The priestess would be buried alive beneath the city, whose virtue she had supposedly stained, out of sight, out of mind. But this law, this ancient mechanism of control, left room for something darker. You see, no woman could be accused of incestum without a man involved. Yet the names of these men, the supposed seducers, have been scrubbed clean from history. No records, no charges, no trials. Cornelia was not the only Vestal executed under Emperor Domitian. In the span of just a few years, 3 others were also condemned to the wall. The official reasons: breaking their vows, threatening Rome's purity. But the pattern is impossible to ignore. Some ancient sources describe Domitian as a man obsessed with morality in public and obsessed with control in private. A man who projected virtue while extinguishing those who challenged or exposed him. The Vestals, for all their seclusion, were still part of the inner sanctum of Roman power. They saw everything, they heard whispers, they carried secrets, and once a secret becomes a threat, power moves quickly to silence it. No historian has openly accused the chief priesthood or the emperor of misconduct with the Vestals. But ask yourself, why would an empire so obsessed with ritual purity execute its own priestesses one after another? Was it really about preserving Rome's virtue, or was it about preserving something else? Cornelia never named a man. No trial transcript records her confession. She proclaimed her innocence until the very end. Her cries to Vesta, to the gods, echoed down the streets as she was led to die. And when the executioner offered her a hand, she denied him. She walked to her tomb on her own terms. Historians like Pliny the Younger, who witnessed her final moments, noted her composure. He wasn't sure whether she was guilty, but even he admitted she acted like someone who had nothing to hide. And that's the part Rome couldn't tolerate. A chaste woman with dignity, a priestess who wouldn't kneel, a symbol they could no longer control, so they buried her, not just under stone, but under silence. Cornelia didn't choose this life. Before her voice echoed behind stone, Cornelia was a child chosen for sanctity, born into a respected Roman family, taken from her family before she truly knew herself, sworn into silence and chastity to serve the flame of Vesta. Her parents, like so many Roman elites, considered it an honor proof of their status, a path to spiritual glory. But was it truly an honor to offer your child to the state, to a system that promised protection but delivered silence, pressure, and in Cornelia's case, death? They gave Rome their daughter. Rome gave them a funeral. We don't know what Cornelia thought of her parents as the bricks rose around her, whether she remembered the day they dressed her in white and handed her to the priesthood, whether she felt pride or betrayal. But what is clear is this: no one came for her, not the goddess, not the people, not her family. In the end, she belonged to the state more than she ever belonged to them.